Only Malware in the Building was filmed in front of a live studio audience. All right.
Accessing Rick Howard's laptop.
Dave, what are you doing?
Oh, nothing.
Access granted to Rick Howard's laptop.
Just working on something important.
You're not trying to redesign your personal website again, are you? Because the last time it looked like a GeoCities nightmare.
No. I've learned my lesson. That background music was a bad idea.
So, what's the big secret then? Whoa, wait a second. Are you hacking someone?
Hey, what's up, guys? Anyone else having weird computer issues today?
Like what, Rick?
Well, I keep getting these emails about joining the Meets of the Month Club.
You've got mail.
You know, I didn't sign up for that, but now I can't stop thinking about bacon.
Are you sure you didn't sign up during a late night snack attack? Wait. Dave, did you hack Rick's laptop?
I did. But I only did it because Rick ate all of my famous buffalo dip at the company picnic. I just wanted a little payback.
Dave, you can't just hack someone to get back at them. That's not cool.
Geez, Dave, you could have just asked. Now I'm stuck with a lifetime supply of sausages and salami. Wait, actually, that doesn't sound so bad. So thanks, I guess.
Remember, folks, hacking is a serious issue, even if it's just for a prank. Always respect others' privacy and stay safe online. You never know what kind of trouble you might get into.
I'm sorry, Rick. I shouldn't have done that. Thanks, Selena, for setting me straight.
No worries, Dave. Just don't mess with my email again, or I'll send you a subscription to the Veggies of the Month Club.
Honestly, he probably needs one with all his dips. All right, everyone, stay cyber safe. And remember, whether it's spam emails or sneaky hacks, always keep your guard up online. Today, we're talking about the abuse of legitimate services for malware and phishing delivery. Threat actors don't always create and manage their own infrastructure or buy and build malware. They often rely on legitimate services to help them along the way. So what does this landscape look like? What are common tools threat actors are using? And why do hackers choose legitimate services over customized or commodity tooling? Some research that we published recently is about... Dave, are you distracted by your dips?
I'm sorry. I have a delicious truffle parmesan aioli dip today. This is a rich and creamy dip made from truffle oil, grated Parmesan cheese, garlic, and mayonnaise. It offers an earthy and umami-packed experience. But carry on.
I just gained 10 pounds listening to that description. Okay.
The best part of aioli dips are they're just mayonnaise, but fancy.
I subscribe to that philosophy.
So anyway, Dave, if we can interrupt your lunch to go back to the abuse of legitimate services, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was the abuse of Cloudflare tunnels to deliver malware. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this before, but it's kind of an interesting technique.
Is it completely different, or is it just another variation on the theme, Selena?
It is a variation on the theme. So essentially what it does is it abuses the Try Cloudflare feature that allows an attacker to create a one-time tunnel without creating an account. So Cloudflare offers Cloudflare tunnels as part of some of the services that they sell, but if you're a threat actor, you can just spin one up temporarily and then take it down again. So for those of you who aren't familiar, tunnels are a way to remotely access data and resources that aren't part of the local network. So very similar to how we might use a virtual private network, VPN, or secure shell, SSH.
You know, Selena, Rick is so old. When you mention tunnels, he immediately thinks of his model train set. Rick also gets nervous when you mention tunnels. He's so old, he doesn't like being around anyone digging deep holes in the ground.
Oh, God.
Although, he does enjoy being inside of a tunnel. It's one of the few places so dark you can't see his wrinkles. You know the real reason Rick enjoys being inside of a tunnel? It's the echo. He never gets tired of hearing his own voice.
I'm hoping that on the backside, when the echo returns, it may sound even better than the first time I said it, which is hard to say. But
isn't that just a podcast?
Exactly right.
Well, threat actors like tunnels too, because in the same way they cloak Rick's wrinkles, they can also be a way to sort of cloak threat actor activity, potentially, using legitimate services for malware delivery or as part of an overall campaign can sometimes allow threat actors to sort of hide in potentially legitimate network traffic. So
that's where I was confused, Selena, because would they use it? They set up these tunnels to be like their command and control channel, or are they establishing tunnels to victim data somehow and seeking it out that way? I'm unclear about how all that works.
Yeah, so the malware payload URL is the try Cloudflare tunnel, and then it will access or connect to the command and control that will then download the payload. So it's essentially spinning it up that way, but it is temporary, right? So we've seen a lot of this threat actor cluster in particular that we're tracking will send it up. Essentially, each use of the try Cloudflare tunnels, it generates this subdomain on trycloudflare.com. So it's just a series of random words separated by hyphens, trycloudflare.com. And the traffic to the subdomains is proxied through Cloudflare to the operator's local server. So again, you're seeing, in kind of the same way how Cloudflare might be used to sort of cloak phishing websites, for example, it's proxied through the operator's local server, so you don't necessarily communicate with the threat actor directly. So it's kind of interesting how the threat actors are using this, but with each campaign, it's a new subdomain that's spun up. So they're not relying on the same infrastructure over time. You don't have the ability necessarily to block just on subdomains, right? Like oftentimes we're like, oh, indicators of compromise. Here's a domain. Here's a C2 server that you should block it because it's used over and over and over again. But in this case, essentially, they can have a low-cost method essentially to stage attacks, use these helper scripts, limited exposure for detection and takedown efforts. So it's kind of interesting. And another thing that I thought was pretty cool about this particular threat campaign is, so it goes through a variety of different things. So it's a URL leading to a shortcut .url file, a lot of different things. It uses WebDAV, so they're hosting the payload on one of these sort of external file shares. Again, WebDAV is a legitimate file hosting, file sharing type of service that you might, again, see in an enterprise. But what ultimately it leads is to a Python installer package and a series of Python scripts that actually lead to malware installation. So again, you're seeing Python, a legitimate software, Python scripts, something that, a lot of people use in their day-to-day. But in this case, they're actually leading to malware installation. And loading the Python installer alongside the scripts is like, oh, well, if you don't have Python on your computer already, we'll set it up and then be able to execute the malware. So it's kind of an interesting, also a bit convoluted attack chain.
It strikes me that what maybe a conundrum this is for Cloudflare, because on the one hand, you want to be able to demo your services and you want that to be as friction-free as possible, but then you have to dial in how much are you going to tolerate bad folks using your services for free for bad things.
Jeez, Dave, wait, so serious here. You sound like the guy in the Mission Impossible mission tapes. This message will self-destruct. Take it down a notch, will you? This is only a podcast.
We should make a self-destructing podcast. One of our episodes.
All of our fans say that every day when we broadcast our thing.
Yeah.
But you do bring up a good point, Dave, right? I mean, this is a conundrum that certainly not just Cloudflare is dealing with, but any company that provides some type of infrastructure, service, or tool that can be potentially abused by threat actors. I think that, we see it with, for example, Google Drive or OneDrive. You have Discord and Telegram. We can get into this, which I thought was pretty interesting, actually. Even info stealers using Steam, the video game community, basically, as a command and control service. So you have, threat actors that are incorporating legitimate tools and services into their attack chains. And so this is a constant battle for the organizations whose services are being abused, because obviously they want to provide resources to people that are using it legitimately to try things out or to, store their legitimate files. And so I think it's a bit of a sort of whack-a-mole situation a lot of times. And especially if you're seeing something like temporary infrastructure, it could be very short-lived. I mean, oftentimes we'll see a threat actor that I track pretty often, T82541, they like using Google Drive URLs to deliver VBS scripts, and they will store them on Google Drive, but it's so short-lived because, Google will take it down or they'll identify it as malware. So oftentimes these might have short shelf lives, but they can be very effective because oftentimes these are legitimate traffic. I mean, you're going to be using these tools in the enterprise. And so it's kind of clever on the part of the attackers. And this kind of speaks a little bit to the ongoing experimentation that we're seeing from a lot of different threat actors, trying to expand their wheelhouse, trying new things, adopting new techniques to try and, push the boundaries, see how effective these new techniques and tools can be. The Cloudflare cluster that we're looking at typically delivers remote access Trojans. So ultimately, they're delivering malware, right? So it's not that they're just going in there and, trying to do a live off the land type of situation. They will ultimately download and execute malware on a host. So it's just part of the overall malicious attack chain in this case. So there's multiple opportunities for detection and defense.
So is it true, Celia, there's two cases here? There's the generic case where they're using Cloudflare infrastructure for their, command and control infrastructure with no relation to the victim. It's just a place like if they would have set up their own infrastructure, they're using Cloudflare's to facilitate that stuff. That's the first case. And the second case, though, is if they've actually compromised a victim that uses Cloudflare, they could use that infrastructure internally. And it looks like it's the victim's infrastructure, which makes it even less likely to be discovered. Is that the way you're seeing it, or am I missing that?
So we haven't seen the second example, but in theory, I mean, that's something that a threat actor could do. It's, very similar when you compromise an account for emails and then send emails and it looks like it's coming from a legitimate sender. So I think that, the compromise of legitimate services and using them is something that is, of course, important, but separate from the abuse of legitimate services for fully malicious activity.
So what I find interesting, Dave, about this is even the bad guys decided that cloud infrastructure is a better way to go than building it themselves, right? They see the advantages than...
Yeah, and I think, another element of this that Selena pointed out is that when you're piggybacking off of other people's legitimate infrastructure, it's not like people are going to just block Google, right? If something's coming from a Google domain, you have to have scrutiny with it, but can't just block all of Google. Your users aren't going to stand for that.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because if we're talking about abuse of legitimate services, we see certainly, software, cloud storage, a lot of, for example, C2 with, like I was mentioning, like the social channels or Telegram or Discord. But then you also have this sort of interesting increase in delivery of legitimate remote access tools. So whether you call them RMMs, RMS, just a lot of different acronyms for it, but they're essentially legitimate remote access software tools that you use in your day-to-day. So for example, Screen Connect, Atera, Net Support, And so that's pretty interesting because, of course, if you're an organization that uses Screen Connect and you see the download and installation of Screen Connect, it's not going to automatically be a red flag as opposed to, if you're downloading and installing an Agent Tesla executable, that's going to light up your EDR. So it's pretty interesting to see sort of the adoption of some of these more RMM tools as part of the final stage. We've seen it with APT actors, certainly TA450, which is an Iranian-aligned actor, aka Muddy Water, that delivered a Terra, reported on that back in March. And then recently we just published another piece of research about campaigns delivering Screen Connect. So they're posing as the U.S. Social Security Administration to ultimately deliver Screen Connect. So yeah, this increase in these RMM tool delivery, I think, is also very interesting and speaks to the sort of overall abuse of legitimate services trend, I think. Stay tuned. There's more to come after the break.
So it appears to me the defensive strategy that would work here is some kind of zero trust strategy. But it's the way you've described the problem, it has to be so granular that I don't think many organizations have the capability to identify, say a Cloudflare tunnel that is legitimate versus illegitimate. Okay, it seems like that's a really hard thing to do. Am I wrong about that?
Well, I think with the Try Cloudflare, those are the sort of temporary free version, free tier. So I think, blocking Try Cloudflare domains, if they're not used within your organization, is a very, very effective way of...
Yeah, but if you're using Try Cloudflare, what are we calling this thing again?
Try Cloudflare.
Try Cloudflare.
Yeah, so they would be, So of course, creating like a safe list of domains. Similar, right, to what you're talking about, though, is very much sort of access control, restricting network traffic, making sure that that's legitimately used within your organization and potentially restricting the use of it where it is not required or used. Certainly, in general, you're going to have a setup to safe list various servers, whether that's, for your Screen Connect or your net support or a Terra or, even if it's a web dev, SMB, these are also things that we've seen abused a lot more as well. And sort of, just blatantly allowing any outbound SMB connection is just not necessarily the best way to do things.
Selena, could you clarify what we're talking about with Screen Connect here? I mean, I know, for Rick, when he thinks about Screen Connect, he's probably plugging in his 13-inch black and white Zenith television.
So I can play Pong, all right? That's the reason you have that.
I have never played Pong.
Oh, you are out of the club.
Come on.
Selena. You are out of the club. All right, producers, we need a new host. Get her out of here.
I mean, we can play Pong like in our browsers right now. There's nothing stopping you from playing Pong.
I think I missed the draw of Pong. I was playing Oregon Trail. That was my computer video game.
So some redemption, not much, but some redemption. Okay.
That's legit. See, the problem is Rick actually experienced the Oregon Trail. He's so old.
Yeah, and I want to talk to somebody about the inaccuracies they have in that game, right? Because it just didn't get it correctly right.
You fjorded all the rivers. Yes.
Right, and then he died of dysentery.
Yeah, so when we're talking about Screen Connect, it is a legitimate remote access software tools. There's a lot of them that essentially will allow enterprises to remotely connect to your computer and manage software, updates, file sharing, things like that. And we've just seen how threat actors can essentially use them as remote access Trojans, very much the same way, right? Where you can set it all up. And sometimes what we've seen is with, for example, telephone-oriented attack delivery, where, it's someone who says, oh, here's this invoice that you need to pay, and you're talking on the phone with someone who pretends to be support, but what they're really doing is walking you through installing remote access software. They're like, I'll help you uninstall or help you pay for this or whatever. But what a victim is doing is enabling remote access on their device. But of course, if you're not familiar with the use of these tools, or you see something, oh, this is just legitimate remote access software. Like you might not immediately think that, oh, hey, this is malware. So again, it just goes back to this idea of threat actors abusing legitimate services. So they're not designed to be used that way, but unfortunately, threat actors have found ways to sort of get around these things and abuse them for malicious purposes.
Well, when we talk about zero trust as a strategy, we typically talk about identity and access management for people. And most of the times we talk about devices. Okay, the thing that we lack right now as an industry, I believe, is software components, right? The internal scripts that we write, internal software that we write, and even commercial software that we use, right? Who is authorized to use the Screen Connect app? And will we allow the data to go back and forth between that? I think people struggle with trying to figure those kinds of things out.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also, if oftentimes zero trust runs up against the ease of use, right? So oftentimes you have the struggle with, as an organization, I want to be very secure, but my employees will be very frustrated if they have a lot of roadblocks and running into restrictions on the things that they're used to using. So I think, that's something that obviously we saw, I think, with the adoption of MFA, for example. People are like, wait, I have to enter another passcode?
So hard. So hard.
Whenever you add additional friction to somebody's general workflow, it tends to cause frustration and oftentimes will be bypassed for convenience.
Dave, what's the appropriate dip when you have to put in your second factor?
That's easy. Smoked salmon and dill spread.
And now, unnecessary cooking instructions with Dave Bittner. First, our list of ingredients. Ingredient 1,
Smoked salmon,
ingredient 2,
cream cheese,
ingredient 3,
fresh dill,
and finally, ingredients 4 and 5.
capers, and just a little hint of lemon.
And then I guess you just stir it all together? This has been Unnecessary Cooking Instructions with Dave Bittner. Now, back to your regularly scheduled programming.
It's a wonderful distraction from when you want to throw your mobile device through a plate glass window.
That sounds good.
Yeah. Selena, let me ask you this. I mean, what about the providers themselves? You kind of mentioned that folks like Google have, I guess, relatively quick turnaround of tamping these things down. But from your point of view, the view that you have into these sorts of things, how does that game of whack-a-mole play out?
So I think, especially when we're talking about some of this temporary infrastructure, it's very short-lived. So if it doesn't have a whole lot of longevity, there's often not a lot that the organizations can necessarily do. Gets spun up and taken down really quickly. But I do think that a lot of these services have automated detections in place, very similar to how we have it on our own hosts, where, if this is something that's malicious or, I caught this, we're not going to let anyone download it. So we certainly run into that oftentimes with cloud-hosted malware. But it's an ongoing battle. I think some services are better at addressing it than other services, I think. And, I do think that there is a very good discussion to be had, and that is ongoing, that at what point do we not have these available? And at what point do we say it's not really worth protecting criminals and enabling criminals? But at the same time, it can be very, very difficult to sort of police the use of your tools and services. Certainly, I think we see this, for example, with social media, right? Oftentimes it can be very much abused. A lot of disinformation and things can be rapidly spread very, very quickly and metastasize. And it can be hard to sort of just bring the banhammer down diligently and very effectively. So it's an ongoing conversation. And I think it's also, part of the conversation of for example, there are services and platforms that host quote unquote red team tools. that are almost exclusively abused by threat actors.
Right.
And you can pretty much post anything as long as you say, this is for educational purposes only. And, within a few days, a few weeks, it's going to be showing up in threat actor abuse. So, it's kind of that conversation of like, okay, we're providing these tools for security practitioners. We're providing these tools to the greater community to enable information sharing and existence on the internet or red teaming and security. But they're also very, very, very often abused by threat actors. And I think that's an ongoing conversation. I think it used to be very much like a free-for-all, everything's allowed, but I feel like the InfoSec community is kind of shifting their mindset a little bit on that. And we're having more of these conversations to talk about, how can we maybe restrict the use of things, or is it ethical to be, providing and sharing these tools, and et cetera, et cetera.
To defend the service providers like Google, is it legitimate to blame them because some bad guy purchased their software and used it for bad purposes? It's kind of like, we would blame the phone company for social engineers using their telephones, to get credit card information. So I agree that at some level, the service providers could find some obvious things, but I think most of this falls on the practitioner to protect their own environments.
I tend to err on the other side just from the point of view that, like, this is something that drives me to distraction over on our Hacking Humans podcast, is this whole notion of the big tech companies saying, well, we can't do that at scale. And to me, I'm like, well, if you can't do that at scale, then maybe you shouldn't do that at all.
You forget the very pressing concern on their part, Dave, is that they need to make money, right? So at scale.
But maybe they don't need to. You're right, exactly. That's the thing. Maybe they don't need to make all of the money. Maybe just a normal amount of money. But this is where then you find you get policy pushbacks and you get regulations placed on you. If you're not going to do it yourself, then somebody's going to swoop in and say, all right, you're not going to take care of consumers. Watch this. And, that's the back and forth. That's the dance.
I mean, I do have to say too, though, like, just because you're using, if you're a threat actor, just because you're using a legitimate service or abusing it, doesn't mean that if your attack is going to be effective, right? So let's say, yes, a user clicked on a malicious Google Drive link. Going back to Rick's point, do you have restrictions on, can I download JavaScript and open it in anything but a text file? If yes, then that should be something that could be addressed.
There are bigger problems there. Yeah. Problems.
So I it's really going back to defense in depth. Like, yes, companies can do more, I think, to better police and restrict the abuse of their platforms and services, but also within enterprises, there are layers, and you really want to make sure that you practice defense in depth. And it kind of goes back to, the human layer, right? Human beings are going to make mistakes. And making sure that you are doing whatever you can to prevent the mistake from becoming a catastrophe. So whether that's, blocking JavaScript, or, making sure that only your developers are installing Python, or making sure that you're restricting connections to only safe listed servers if we're talking about any sort of virtual command and control or file shares. It's important to the enterprise as well to put their shields up, to quote CISA. But I do think that there are many, many opportunities for detection and defense when you have, even if it's the abuse of legitimate services. We'll be right back.
All right. Well, it's interesting stuff here. And Selena, thank you for sharing all of this. It's fascinating. It's a shame we have to run so quickly, but I know Rick has scheduled his entire afternoon to be playing with his CB radio.
Oh, you sound so much. You sound like a bucket of gold.
To be immediately followed by a long nap. All right. So that's on the schedule.
I will be joining you, but not together.
Not there's anything wrong with that. All right.
No. It's the snoring. That's all.
I have to get on Dave's dips. However, I am much more interested in hot sauce. So next time for the next podcast, I'll bring a list of my favorite hot sauces because we just did the hot ones challenge. And let me tell you, it was pretty spicy.
You did the hot ones challenge.
I did. I had a whole party. A bunch of friends came over. We all did the hot ones challenge.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Let's just say it wasn't quite the same mouthfeel as a truffle parmesan dip.
No, I wouldn't think so. I think after that, you'd have no feeling in your mouth.
Honestly, yeah. I think that's what happened.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, Selena. And thank you, Rick. This was great fun as always.
Thank you.
See you guys.
And that's Only Malware in the Building, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. In a digital world where malware lurks in the shadows, we bring you the stories and strategies to stay one step ahead of the game. As your trusty digital sleuths, we're unraveling the mysteries of cybersecurity, always keeping the bad guys one step behind. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you ahead in the ever-evolving world of cybersecurity. If you like the show, please share a rating and review in your podcast app. This episode was produced by Liz Stokes, mixing and sound design by Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Brandon Karpf. Simone Petrella is our president. Peter Kilby is our publisher.
I'm Dave Bittner.
And I'm Rick Howard.
And I'm Selena Larson. Thanks for listening.